Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. So Andrew's not here. He's fired for the night.
AKA, I'm too tired.
Well... No, y'all were too tired is the reason why we didn't do this show over the weekend.
True.
He has this boring adult thing called a job where they expect him to show up on their schedule and not his. It's really inappropriate. I don't recommend anybody grow up and get a job, but everybody seems to want to do it regardless of what I advise.
Probably to fund the ammo.
That might be a good point. Anyway, Nick is joining us this afternoon. He and Andrew went to an MDFI class to play around with shotguns, and I saw an opportunity to have him come on and talk about like his experience, how he feels it went, what blew up, what fell apart, and then in the process probably try to talk me into a 12 gauge because I've taken immeasurable heat over the years for not owning a shotgun, as if I've, spit on people's mothers and public and done all sorts of horrible, unspeakable things. But like, Nick, like you and I were talking about before the show started, I'm not a shotgun guy. I fired them. I know how to run them. I'm not a moron. I just, the shotgun has never spoken to me and said, Phil, you want to put me in your closet. I'm a rifle guy at the end of the day.
Nothing wrong with being a rifle guy, man. I was too. I had a shotgun for the same reason most people had shotguns. I got invited to go bird hunting one day. That's really what it was. I bought a Remington 870 about 20 years ago. Yeah, almost 20 years ago. And went pheasant hunting. And from the rest of the time, it mostly sat in my closet, almost exclusively. And then the Illinois assault weapon ban got put in practice. And if you do keep your AR, 10-round magazine, 10 rounds of 5.56 is not a lot. It's not a lot. You can run out of that real quick. And 5.56 has a notorious habit of penciling through people and not doing a job in a defensive situation.
True.
Fantastic platform, acceptable cartridge. 12 gauge, on the other hand, still limited to 5 rounds in the tube because Illinois is deciding to be a cuck. But those rounds are an order of magnitude larger, an order of magnitude more effective, especially in short ranges like for home defense. Now, you say you're not a shotgun guy. I think that's because you haven't taken Trek's class. I really do.
I mean, that there's a possibility there. Because, being on the wrong end of the country from Trek, me going up to Michigan to see him is a 2-day trip.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 days back, which basically means a week off of work just for me to go see the man, unfortunately.
Oh, for certain it is. Now, granted, there's probably a class like Trek's in your area that you could find, and heck, he might even know somebody he'd recommend for you. But I tell you this, I was acceptably mediocre with a shotgun when I started this class.
That's high praise, though.
I was acceptably mediocre. I mean, I could hit a clay more often than I'd miss. Maybe 60% of them I could hit. I can shoot a shotgun at a static target and hit it most of the time. I could reload it, but not under pressure. And I really didn't understand how to manipulate it correctly to really employ its full benefit. I mean, shotgun recoil kind of sucks, right?
Yeah, fair bit.
Doesn't have to. There's a way of mitigating the recoil that Trek teaches at class. He calls it ripping the gun. Basically, it's a push-pull method. Pulling it into your shoulder like you do with any other rifle, but at the same time, you are pushing it forward with your support hand as hard as you can while you're pulling the trigger. That cuts the recoil down to the point where I was only a little, like, you noticed you had gone to the range. I wasn't hurting like I usually was after a round of sporting clays. What's a round of sporting clays? 40, 50 rounds? This was 300. So, I mean, not even a bruise from 300 rounds of 12 gauge.
That's actually impressive.
I was blown away with how big of a difference it made.
I mean, I've bruised my shoulder with a 308 Winchester doing load development, where you just you sit out there and 50 rounds down range from a prone.
Yep.
on a shooting mat. That will be enough to leave a nice little greenish purple
My
mark on your
300 Win
shoulder.
Mag does the exact same thing. I'm
Get
going to
about
try the
5
same
rounds
shooting
instead of
technique
50,
with
I'm
that.
sure.
Well, no. You're good for about 20, and then it starts to hurt. Of course, then you can taste a little bit of copper, too, if you're really sending the rounds. But I think that shooting technique would really help. Number one, help your enjoyment of shooting the shotgun, and learning how to properly use the ability a shotgun has to swap out rounds for different purposes. Teaches you, they start off pretty slow. They do their medical brief, their medical and safety brief, which takes an hour, and it is not a boring hour. Your attention is held the entire time. It is the most comprehensive safety brief I have ever sat through for a class. I mean, I've taken pistol, rifle classes. I've taken long-range marksmanship classes. I've never had a medical brief or a safety brief taken that seriously and done that well.
So, just side note, was this your first MDFI class?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was my first MDFI class. As many of you know, I'm from Illinois. Drove up from Illinois. It's about a 6-hour drive. It was worth every hour of the 6-hour drive to come up to. And I'll probably be going up for some more here. But, they walk you through the medical brief, walk you through the safety brief. Then he does what he's called the show and tell, where everybody lays out all their equipment, all their shotguns in this case. And they talked over the differences between them all. I did not know there was such a thing as a smart and a dumb shotgun. You familiar with the term?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Most pump action shotguns are what are called dumb shotguns. Okay. Every time you cycle the action, it's going to load a shell out of the tube, right? There are semi-automatic shotguns that are dumb just like that. Anytime you stroke the bolt, it's going to load one from the tube. Then there are smart shotguns like the A300 and the Beretta 1301 and a bunch of other ones. Those don't have to load from the tube. They can tell the difference mechanically between a fired round and you grabbing the bolt and clearing a round. So you can, if you want to, if you're sitting there and you've got shotgun with your bolt locked forward, empty chamber, say you don't feel like storing it with a loaded chamber in the house, right? Break in, all right. Hit the action release, cycle the bolt, it'll load a round. If you skip the step of hitting the action release, you can load a round of your choice off your side saddle depending on the situation. So let's say you're up in your cabin out in the boonies and you've got, say, a large dangerous predator coming towards your animals, whatever, your dog, your cat, your chickens. You're probably at 25 yards. I mean, you might be okay hitting it with buckshot, but then you might also hit your chicken coop. So what you do, pull that action back, drop in a slug, let it fly home, bam, done. So you don't have to fully unload the tube or load it from the tube.
That's interesting. It must mean that it's holding the lifter.
It is.
When you don't hit the action release.
Yeah. So there's a little button on the underside of the A300s that if you hit that, it will act as though you have fired a round. If you don't, and you're just running the action, you can run that action as many times as you want to get that round cleared out of there, and it's not just going to bump another round up into the tube. So say you have like a bad primer or something like that, you can rack that back, not have it dump another round up into the chamber on top of it, and you can actually assess what's going on. Instead of then, now you got a shell coming out, you got another shell coming up, getting things all confused around. It's actually really nice, very convenient.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like manual of arms wise, showing clear, mitigating. That sounds like something that's so common sense. Every manufacturer should be doing it. Honestly,
it's in a lot of the newer shotguns, even some of the newer pumps, from what they were talking about. Just because it allows you, number one, to safely clear the chamber and not have another round loaded in from the magazine that you cannot remove. And it allows you to do some little different things with round selection. So, if you're out deer hunting And you've also got rabbit tags, and you want to pull a slug out, drop birdshot in. You can go ahead and do that very easily without having to slap one in the tube and then cycle it and chuck around out on the ground. It's interesting.
So you attended the class with an A300.
Yep. Bone stock Beretta. Yeah. Benelli. No, I don't have Benelli money.
The two B names always click together.
I know, and they both sell all the shotguns.
Yeah, that's the other problem. So yeah. Was it? Are we talking about like you just came into class with a bone stock A300? Had you already started fooling with it?
The only thing I added was a sling, and a quick release mount for the sling.
Okay, but sling is mandatory in my world.
It really is.
Any long gun.
For any long gun that you're going to take to a class, it is just from the sake of being able to just let the gun hang when you're taking a break. So the A300 is kind of like I would call it like your entry level tactical semi-automatic shotgun. Once you get away from like the Turkish stuff and the pumps, it is, I would say, it's not fancy. I'll put it that way. It's not a fancy shotgun. It's got a pretty traditional stock. It's got a pretty traditional forend. It does have rifle sights on it, which is nice, especially in the Ultima Patrol. I can't actually get the Ultima Patrol, so I have to have the A300 Patrol, not the Ultima, because the Ultima comes with an extended mag tube.
Oh.
I know. Tell me about it. It was a bear getting one. They don't make very many that way. But really, you can go to that class with a pump action shotgun. Trek was saying that he had people come with a goose gun with a 28-inch barrel. There's really no shotgun that's wrong for the class. Just bring what you have. So like if you have anything but probably like a side-by-side, but if you have even an older 12 gauge 870 or Mossberg 590 or something like that, you'd probably be just fine.
Somewhere out there's a single action society shooter who's like, I bet I could.
Talking
about the side-by-side.
I bet you they could. I know a couple of cowboy action shooters that would keep up just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But so I bought that shotgun because of Illinois' assault weapon ban changes and the fact that I wanted something with a little more punch since I couldn't have extra rounds. I didn't want to mess around with it too much because I didn't know what I needed. So I figured I would take that class. And the A300 and I believe the 1301 comes stock from the factory with a piece of Velcro in the box. That piece of Velcro is cut to fit perfectly on the receiver. I don't know what YouTube's guidelines is, but I'm not going to go grab the shotgun right now because it's loaded. That piece of Velcro on the box perfectly fits the receiver. It's cut out, laser, really nice. It'll hold those SE-TAC shotgun cards or anybody else's shotgun cards.
Mm-hmm.
Those, I got the elastic ones. Fantastic. Excellent for carrying extra rounds on the gun. I didn't have a single problem with them flying out. They retained much better than I thought they would. I think that if you were to just want to pick up a shotgun and not do anything to it, A300, perfectly acceptable. If your budget allows it, the 1301 has a few nicer things. Apparently the gas system handles recoil a little bit better and mitigates it a little bit better with higher loads, but Andrew would be able to tell you better about that one. The way I try to get into guns is I will buy what I believe to be a middle of the road gun. Not cheap, not the new hotness 1301s, which there were a lot of in the class and they performed very well. But my $900 1301 was keeping up perfectly fine. And you know what? A lot of the drills that we were doing, it was a lot of, one shot, do a reload to an empty chamber. Do a couple shots with some number of rounds in the gun. And if you happen to empty it, you got to top off and finish the string with emergency reloads. However, you're going to do it feeding off the gun. One of the ones that Andrew and me really enjoyed, Rolling Thunder, everyone is in a line down the range. First guy on the left fires one round. Then it goes one round each down the line. Then once the end guy's done, comes back 2 rounds each down the line, then 3 rounds each down the line. Got up to 7. Well, my shotgun doesn't hold 7 rounds. It holds 6. 5 in the tube, 1 in the chamber. So I'm doing an emergency reload in the middle of the shot string, and I need to do it quick enough that the other people are also having to do reloads, even though they have higher capacity guns than me. And all the while, the shooting never stops. So you're loading the entire time you're not firing.
Yeah, I know that was something that you and I had talked about. Like, again, me not being a shotgun guy, but me being a revolver guy on occasion, and something that had been told to me a long time ago by another revolver person. And this really applies to like revolver, shotguns, and lever actions. Is
Mm-hmm.
if you're, you have the old adage: if you're not shooting, you should be moving. If you're not moving, you
Yes,
should be reloading. It gets inverted when you're talking about low capacity firearms. If you're not shooting, you
absolutely.
better be moving and reloading. Like
At the
in other
same
words,
time.
the idea is that you should be topping the gun up anytime you're not engaging a target. Like if you get any
Yes,
brief break in the action, you get a little bit of cover, you better stop top the gun up because
absolutely.
the if you have, let's say, that AR with the non piss off the Illinois politicians 30-round magazine,
Right.
if you have to engage a target or two and then you get behind cover, if you have a moment to pop the magazine out and put a new magazine in, retain that mag, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you don't, you've still got probably 15 or 20 rounds in the magazine. You fire
Yeah,
5 or 6 shots with that shotgun, you're dangerously low all of a sudden, if not out.
very, very true. Yeah, yeah. Especially if you live in a state with an assault weapons ban where they're limiting your capacities. I mean, the 6
Or
rounds.
to your point earlier, if the only shotgun you have is that goose gun that has the plug in the
Exactly.
magazine tube to limit
Exactly. A
it for hunting
three-round
use,
limit.
yeah, now
3 round limit on your
you'd
plug.
get better get righteously quick at topping that gun up constantly.
The nice thing though about the shotgun is, unlike an AR, you're not getting one hit with one shell. If you're running 9 pellet buck and you're within your effective range for your shotgun with 9 pellet buck, you are getting 9 holes for the price of one. So, I mean, let's not beat around the bush. Everybody knows that shotguns kill things. Shotguns kill things really well. They are disturbingly devastating, especially at close range. And realistically, close range is what you're going to be doing if you're in a defensive situation, especially in your home. Say 3 o'clock in the morning, door gets kicked in by a crackhead. Fantastic. There is, in my opinion, no more devastating weapon you can use for home defense other than something loaded with grape shot.
I mean, historical anecdote, but if memory serves me, the Germans in World War One tried to have shotguns declared. What was it?
A war crime,
Yeah,
criminally effective and cruel.
they attempted to argue that the use of a shotgun on a battlefield was a war crime. If that tells
Yep.
you anything about what a trench broom would do to somebody at short range.
And realistically, that's only shotguns are only going to become more and more utilized in warfare nowadays. You bring up the goose gun. What's a drone? Electric goose.
Mm-hmm. I was going to
You,
point that out. It's like I was watching something just the other day where they were talking about the widespread usage of very small
mhm,
drones in the Ukraine conflict, and
absolutely.
literally the anti-drone weapons. They're either using net guns or they're
Yep.
using. I mean, they're literally using 12 gauges loaded with birdshot,
Yes,
which
absolutely.
is
With a full choke, ideally.
yeah, because you're trying to hit, like you said, you're trying to hit something about this big that moves
Right?
really quick but doesn't have a lot of meat to it. So
No.
if you whack it with a handful of small pellets, you're going to knock it down.
If you hit a prop, a blade on a prop, it's going to destabilize and probably come down. You
Yeah.
know, yeah. Well, what's the effective range of a net gun? Maybe 150 feet, probably. I mean, I don't know what the effective range. I don't know what the effective range for a goose gun load is.
Well, but
Let me
the other
look that
thing that
up.
is that even not the net gun being the point, but like they're also using things like just nets draped over like the front doors of buildings or over windows,
Absolutely.
just anything to disrupt the drone being able to come in through an open window. And that by itself is enough a lot of times to just
Oh, I
keep
believe
things
that.
where they're not supposed to be.
Yeah, a piece of heavy canvas or something like that. And I have seen too those drone jammer gun things that are supposed to disable the electronics. Great. Now you have a soldier that is entirely dedicated to only drones. And 12 gauge birdshot load might not be the greatest if somebody's storming the room you're in, but it's still an ounce of lead.
Mm-hmm.
It's still at least somewhat effective. And you do see a lot of videos, not just from Ukraine, but from some of the parts of Africa where people are shooting black powder 12 gauges and occasionally intercepting government anti-poaching drones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a pretty cost effective solution at a few cents to a dollar a round.
Well, and I mean, almost any decently equipped police department or SWAT team around the country is going to have at least one 12 gauge in their inventory for no other reason than for breaching doors.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
again, me not being a shotgun guy, I do kind of draw comparisons. The fact that you're not dumping half a 30-round magazine into a door frame to try to open a door up. They get the master key out and they blow the door, the lock, and half the door frame into the room they want into in one shot.
Yeah, ideally, and with the proper door breaching rounds, you do that with very minimal risk to anybody inside. Now, I'm not sure that we can buy those rounds, but I mean, I don't imagine they're that terribly difficult to manufacture something.
I mean, if you know somebody with the reloading presses and the hood rat stuff, I'm pretty sure you can make them. It can't be anything that complicated.
It's a lot of it is usually some kind of compressed powder that they're firing out, and it's at such a close range it doesn't have time to disperse and lose its effectiveness. It just goes to show you how versatile shotguns are. I mean, you want to hunt squirrels? Shotgun will do it. Want to hunt birds? Shotgun will do it. Deer? Shotgun will do it. Coyotes? Shotgun will do it. Crackhead? Shotgun will do it. Black bear? Shotgun will do it. Brown bear? Shotgun will do it. Moose? Shotgun will do it. But you're going to have to be close with those moose. I mean, you're still going to have to be within 100 yards. I mean, sure, 300 Win Mag can do it at 800 yards. I'm not that good of a shot. I wish I was. So it wouldn't matter for me anyway, 300 Win Mag or shotgun. I'm still going to have to get close. But you can't hunt squirrels with a 300 Win Mag. You just flat cannot. Not if you're going to eat any of it.
Not if you're going to eat it. I mean, if you just want to turn it into like bologna mist, then yeah, sure, that'll work fine.
Oh, sure, yeah. If you want to remove a squirrel from the face of the earth, yes. A 300 Win Mag does a fantastic job.
Oh, so now we pissed off anti-gunners and PETA all in one episode. Outstanding, Nick.
That's fine. I got a cousin that's involved in PETA. I've already got them angry at me.
Oh, Jesus. Don't get me started or I'll start asking questions about...
You don't want to know. She is a special individual.
Oh, no. It's usually when people start talking about how cute does an animal have to be before you won't eat it? I'm like, how interesting that you would assume there's a point at which I won't eat an animal. Let's start there.
Truth. Really more depends on how good they taste.
And
squirrels
how
are pretty good.
I am.
That too. I mean,
yeah. Although I will say that if the SHTF ever does kick off, there's a couple of yappy little purse dogs around here that are going to go missing on day one, just on principle.
Yeah. Right. The nice thing, I mean, it's not going to take a lot to put them down, I suppose.
Harsh,
especially if they're aggressive towards people. Yeah, I know. Yeah, we've got a couple of neighbors over here that have some of those little ankle biters that they have allowed to become very aggressive, and it's not acceptable. Whatever size your dog is, you need to train your dog.
Mm-hmm. Before somebody trains it for you.
Exactly, and that's unfortunately the way it ends a lot of the time. We had one of the neighborhood dogs bite one of our other neighbors because he was jogging, and it triggered a prey response, triggered a chase response in the dog. But there's nothing you can do about that if it's a poorly trained dog.
Anyway, to get the train back on the tracks, you're worse than I am for getting off topic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My brain skips around like a squirrel. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But so shotguns.
So you came to the class with, let's call it a factory box stock A300.
Yep.
I'll give you the sling because to me, all long guns require slings. Like, I'm prepared to die on that hill. Anybody that wants to go for it.
Fair enough.
And sounds like shotgun experience, but maybe not like semi-auto shotgun experience.
No semi-auto shotgun experience at all. Pump action shotgun experience either on a static line or on a pheasant line. So,
All right. So once
well,
you got past the safety briefing and the don't verify you're loaded by looking down the barrel part of it, hopefully,
exactly.
like where did MDFI start y'all? I mean, I would assume they start you with like basic shotgun handling. Like they have to
They
assume that
do.
everyone coming to the class barely knows which end to point at the target, and then take
Yep.
you up from there.
Yeah, they do. They do assume two things. One, that you understand what the buttons on your shotgun do, and two, that you will abide by the 4 rules of firearm safety, which they go through in detail in the safety brief. Those are the only two assumptions. Well, that and you brought your equipment. If you don't bring your equipment, that's on you.
Yeah. Which,
So
side note, that's like the only advice I give a person before they take a firearm to the range is like put all the ammunition for it in another room, figure out
yes,
how the stupid thing works, in a sterile environment, know how to
exactly,
load it, how to unload it, know where all the buttons are before you go to the range and you have live ammo in the gun. Just because
absolutely.
it gives me a twitch when I see somebody like muzzle sweep an entire range while fumbling around looking for buttons on the gun while they've got live ammunition in the chamber. But I digress.
Nothing will get you kicked out of an MDFI class faster than poor muzzle discipline. There is no warning at an MDFI class about poor muzzle discipline.
That's because all or most of their cadre are prior military, and we hate getting guns pointed at us.
So do I. And rightly so.
I don't like
So
that at all.
I don't think anyone's a fan. So the thing we get into next is carry presentations and shooting techniques. So how when you got the shotgun in your hand, you got to do something with it, right? So they talk through different positions for how to carry it effectively and comfortably for long periods of time. So how to carry it in an upright position if you're in an environment that and they talk about the environments and where you're going to use these different carry positions. So if you're moving through, say, a busy environment and a crowd in like a police officer type setting, you'll see a lot of police officers with a gun pointed straight up in the air, perfectly safe. Because if it goes off, worst case, I mean, anybody that's ever gone pheasant hunting or been at a clay range too long has been rained on with birdshot. Come down, bonk you in the head. It's a little bit irritating, but it's not going to kill you. Slug might hurt. It's not going to kill you. So they do how to carry a shotgun, how to present a shotgun in the case in which you've got to transition from a carry position to a near shooting position. So a low ready, a high ready, stuff like that, and the different times in which you're going to use either one. And then the transition from a high or low ready to a shooting position. With a high ready and a shotgun, much like a rifle, you've got that buttstock tucked underneath your arm. So you got to make sure that you've got your sling in an appropriate place that you can pull that shotgun out and get it back seated into your shoulder as quickly as possible without getting tangled up and caught on things.
Mm-hmm.
They do discuss a little bit shooting techniques as far as once you've taken the shot, what you should be doing. For instance, single target environment, police officer on a stop, or on crowd control with a shotgun. Somebody comes out, does something stupid or evil. Take that shot, follow them to the ground with the muzzle. Make sure that they're actually down. Chances are, if you hit them with a 12 gauge, they are. And then they get into what was probably the second most valuable thing I learned in the class, the recoil mitigation that we talked about earlier. As far as how to manage the recoil of a shotgun. They call it a rip it method. You're basically trying to pull the shotgun in half at the receiver. Your firing hand pulling it into your shoulder as hard as you can, your support hand pushing it out as hard as you can. It makes probably a 15 or 20% felt recoil difference.
I mean, that makes sense, though, why they would teach that method and why it would work. Side note, the first time I ever fired a pump shotgun, my silly behind was pulling back on the pump,
Whoops.
which the split second I pulled the trigger,
You lost all support.
hoya. I learned that I learned from my mistakes very quickly and realized I'm like, oh, let's not apply 100% of what I know about shooting rifles, shooting pump action shotguns. But you live and you learn.
Yeah. And second note on shooting shotguns, if you're shooting them a lot, do not thumb over bore your shotgun barrel.
Like with your support hand or with your
Yep.
firing.
With your support hand.
That has never occurred to me to try to do that. Why would you?
I shoot my AR, or used to shoot my AR, with thumb over bore when I'm trying to shoot fast and I'm trying to shoot accurately, because it keeps that muzzle held down and you get
True.
back on target faster. The effort of pushing your arm up for the gun pulls it back down into place and almost snaps it back into place. So my first instinct as a semi-auto rifle shooter is to C-clamp that barrel.
How fast did that barrel get hot?
About 7 rounds into it, I stopped doing that. It basically, the first string of fire taught me not to do that with a shotgun. Now, if you have a barrel shroud, that might be different, but I got a sneaking suspicion, even at high volumes of fire, you're going to get quite hot very quickly. It's a lot of powder and a lot of mass you're sending downrange.
That strikes me so much like a person that's only ever shot semi-autos and suddenly gets handed a revolver and they try to 2 thumbs forward on that revolver.
And
You're only going to make that mistake one
skin
time.
off your thumb. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, with a 38, no.
No.
You're gonna realize your mistake immediately. But yeah, if you're right, if you're playing around with like a big Magnum revolver, you're gonna make that mistake exactly one time and have a hell of a story to tell afterwards. Probably to the ER staff.
Yeah, if you still have a thumb. I've seen some pretty gruesome injury photos about that. After they teach the recoil mitigation process, which is after your first couple strings of fire, so that you do notice the difference, man, it is, no one goes back to shooting the way that they were after learning that. It is such a difference. It even gets you back on target faster. So with they teach that recoil mitigation, they teach a little bit more about the threat engagement process. So they get you doing a little moving and shooting. So you do set course of fire, say 1 round, index your shotgun into a safe location after you make sure the threat's on the ground, check around you, check behind you, while you're keeping the shotgun in a safe direction the entire time. So you do have, 10 guys on a line that are going to be turning 360 with a shotgun. This is why, and the shotguns are loaded, this is why Trek has a zero tolerance policy for any kind of shenanigans.
This is probably also why the safety briefing was as enthusiastic as it was.
Yes. And I would say it was appropriately enthusiastic. He has said that there have been incidents where someone has injured themselves. Fortunately, it was always themselves through poor gun handling at one of his classes. Or not necessarily one of his classes, maybe it was a class he was in attendance for. Could have been. Yeah. I would hope so anyway. I mean, fortunately, no one was ever critically injured. I think he said a guy sent a 9mm round through his hand.
Oh.
Yeah. Going to clear a malfunction and ended up with his pistol pointed at his hand. But I gotta admit, I've been to other classes where guys have gotten real close to doing worse. I was in a rifle pistol class, a pistol carbine kind of like transition class where you're learning how to move between the two and work around barriers and stuff like that. And we had a range safety officer for our local police department, one of our local police departments, ND around 2 inches from his foot. While trying to argue against why he was getting kicked out, he ND'd a second round into the floor about 6 inches from his foot.
Can I take this moment to just tell everybody how absolutely freaking crazy I get whenever somebody argues that only police officers are well enough trained to be trusted with firearms?
Anyone can become negligent.
Yeah, usually about 5 seconds after they think they're too experienced to make a mistake.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is why I wholeheartedly encourage people to be a little bit worried about, every dangerous implement they're playing with, whether it be chainsaws, firearms, table saws.
Chainsaws scare me more than any other tool.
I'm going to be real honest with you. I will happily admit this. Every time I grab my chainsaw, I get a chill up my spine.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I don't know how to use one properly, but just because I have seen what happens when you don't. And I'm like, I don't want to be the next Darwin Award recipient because I did something dumb with a chainsaw.
Shotgun's no different. They were talking about the effectiveness of rifles, pistols, and shotguns in class as part of the safety briefing. And there's an interesting statistic they had from an ER doctor that took their class. This ER doctor worked in a trauma ward. They didn't give his name, I assume for privacy reasons. He said that 80% of people that get shot with a handgun that make it to his trauma ward alive walk out or are carted out. They live, they survive.
Yeah.
On the other hand, 80% of people that come into his trauma ward alive with a rifle or shotgun wound do not survive it. And they made it alive to the hospital. So it's no joke. It's no joke at all. After they talk about stuff like that in a safety briefing, and they're like, okay, guys, we're all going to go out on the line. Everyone is paying attention, which is fantastic. So they talked about threat engagement process, a little bit of shotgun manipulation. So come back to the difference between smart and dumb shotguns, how you have to reload them differently between smart and dumb shotguns, how you have to handle them differently if you just pick it up and it's dry. So you got an empty chamber between smart and dumb shotguns. We kind of broke down a little bit into, okay, this group of people that has these shotguns, the biggest group was 1301 owners. There was a lot of them. I think there was 14 1301s on the range. Hefty chunk of change.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, the Beretta A300 in that same group are all smart shotguns. So they had to be managed in a slightly different way for things like reloading from an empty chamber. Or starting off your gun with a full tube in an empty chamber. You got to remember there's below the lift, behind the lifter, there is an action release button that says, okay, when you cycle that bolt, I want you to feed a round out of the tube. Otherwise, you got to manually drop one in the chamber and touch a round off. So it gets a little bit different. Ammunition management is a huge portion of the class. I would say of all of the drills, ammunition management was probably the majority of them, simply because there are so few rounds in the shotgun. They did it a few different ways. They started out with, okay, we're going to do, you got one round in the shotgun. You're going to fire it, and then you're going to do an emergency reload and fire that second round as quick as you can. At first, it's speed of control. So take your time, figure out whether going over the top of the shotgun or under the shotgun with your cartridge works better for you. My wrists don't turn that way so well, so I have to go over the top of the shotgun for a reload, which works out well for how I have my SE-Tac set up, my shotgun cards. They talked about different ways of carrying extra ammunition on your shotgun. One thing I did not realize is you're familiar with the hard racks, like the aluminum or plastic racks that bolt through your trigger pins. Okay. Apparently, that's one of the more common things that they've seen fail on a 12 gauge. So you've got your two pins coming in through that are normally just a solid pin held in with a detent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, those two pins are held on by two little tiny screws when you've got those carriers on the side. Apparently, those little tiny screws like to shear off under recoil or back out and fall out. And now you've got a bunch of weight on the left-hand side of your shotgun trying to take the trigger pins and pull them out of the left-hand side of your shotgun under high amounts of vibration and pressure.
That makes a certain amount of sense of why that'd be such a likely failure point. I mean, think of it like this. Like you wouldn't take an AR-15 and hang a magazine carrier off the trigger pins.
Right.
Like that just screams bad idea to anybody that knows how that operating system works, because it's like if these things go that direction, then all the guts of the gun just start rattling
just
around
go
and they stop
wherever they
working.
feel like. And in the case of it, most shotguns, your whole trigger group is just dropping out the bottom the next time you fire it, if those pins are gone, if you can get it to fire with those pins gone.
Yeah.
Now, they did mention that the least common thing they have ever seen fail is that patch of Velcro on the side of a shotgun.
I mean, like you said, worst case scenario, if it does let go, then you just lose a card of shotgun shells.
Honestly, I purposefully put my shotgun card on halfway to see what would happen on one of the drills. I was able to go through my entire magazine and reload that card without the card falling off. The recoil of the shotgun caused that card to slap back into the Velcro and adhere stronger than when I initially put it on.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just, I mean, it makes sense when you think about Velcro. Two pieces of Velcro touch each other, they're going to stay there.
Well, and like you said, by agitating those two pieces backwards and forwards, they're just going to continue to grab harder and harder.
Exactly. And, you know, the thing they've said they've never seen fail. They've seen front sights fly off of shotguns, rear sights fly off of shotguns, fore ends come loose, mag tubes unthread themselves and fly off.
I've talked to more than one buddy that's had a red dot like puke its glass out the front of it from shotgun recoil.
Absolutely. That is probably possible. I saw surprisingly few failures. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that entire class, let's see, it was about 20 people, if I recall correctly. We had one person with a 1897 trench gun clone that he did have a failure to extract at one point. That was the only problem that I noticed that he had mechanically. We had a couple of people that were getting some light primer strikes in some of the 1301s, probably due to how sandy it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because anybody that's been up to Trek's new range, the shotgun range that we were on is a sand pit. So kicking up moon dust anytime anybody walks around, kicking up moon dust every time you're firing off the shotguns. So it's an amply dusty environment. You know, I didn't see any shotgun there that had reliability issues in that environment, even after we were most of the way through the day. So it was in the mid to upper 80s. It was bright sun, so all the shotguns were hot and stayed hot the entire time. It was a dusty conditions, and they did not get cleaned at any point in the 300-round course of fire. So I don't really know how long a shotgun will go, especially a semi-auto gun. But with the amount of carbon I pulled out of mine after class, I mean, I sent a picture to our Patreon group. It looked like I was grinding crushed pepper over the table I was cleaning on. I mean, it was a noticeable amount of carbon, and I didn't have a single malfunction. Now, I malfunctioned. I dropped shells on a reload. I fumbled a reload. The shotgun didn't. It was fantastic. You know, and once we got through the ammunition management and we were back into running more aggressive drills where it was longer strings of fire, longer and longer strings of fire, up to that rolling thunder drill that I mentioned, some of those drills, you start empty. Your first shot is throwing a shell in the tube, closing it up. They did one version of Rolling Thunder where you were only allowed to load the tube of your shotgun halfway through. So you were doing one shot from an empty chamber, two shots after you were allowed to put a round in the chamber. So shoot, emergency reload, shoot, then emergency reload 3 rounds, then emergency reload 4 rounds, and then eventually he was like, "Okay, you have 10 seconds to load your shotgun." Most of the guys there were able to get them fully topped off in that 10 seconds. I mean, even the guys that were running pump guns they were doing pretty well at that point. Then we got into patterning, which was pretty interesting. I don't know how familiar you are with shotgun patterning. Okay. Mm-hmm. Basically, for the audience, essentially what it works out to is you put yourself a target out at a known distance, you fire your defensive load at it, you see what spread you get.
Mm-hmm. And more
From what
importantly,
they
you have to know what that spread is at varying ranges.
right. So you start at like say 5 yards. I think we started at on the cardboard targets. Then we backed up to 10 and 15 and 20. Now, the loads I had always used were a Federal 9 pellet kind of El Cheapo double lock. Just very basic. Remington 870 doesn't seem to care what you put in it, it will send it out the barrel. They did okay. They were grouping, respectable meh at 10 yards. 15 yards are like this. 20 yards, you're just about off the torso in a couple of spots. So that makes me have to reassess. Because 20 yards is not actually that far. It's 60 feet. 60 feet. Now, granted, I don't have a hallway 60 feet long in my house, but what happens if I miss? I have to account for where every one of those 9 pellets goes. It's not like a rifle round where if you fire one round, you've missed with one. Do you know where that one went? Those rounds are going to go kind of wherever they feel like going. A lot of the guys there were shooting a Federal 8 pellet flight control, I want to say. Those were having the opposite problem. So at 5 yards, you're functionally shooting a slug.
Mm-hmm.
At 10 yards, you are functionally shooting a slug. At 15 yards, you are getting enough separation between pellets that you can count the pellets. At 20 yards, you're still shooting a pattern like this. Okay, that's all well and good if you are not looking for spread. If you're shooting at something that's 20 yards away, perfectly fine. But you're kind of losing some of the benefit of the shotgun by having it not spread at all for 10 or 15 yards. I don't know about you. My longest hallway is 16 feet. What about yours? Probably down your stairs from your second story.
I don't have a second story.
Okay.
I'm doing the math using my body as a measurement. So like the way my house is laid out is like all the bedrooms are down one hallway.
Yep.
And this is like one of the things that I assessed
Master
about
corridor.
this house. Yeah. Well, this is one of the things I assessed about my house immediately when we were looking at it was I'm like, I only need to hold this hallway to fully control the entire house.
Yep.
Because like you cannot come through the front door
Without being in that hallway.
well, you can get about 6 feet on the inside of the doorway, and now I've got an eyeball on you. And more importantly, if you want to come to where my wife and daughter sleep, you have no choice but to come down that hallway.
Exactly.
Towards a very angry, heavily armed, husband.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's probably
20 feet, maybe.
Not even that. It's
Okay.
a small house.
20 feet.
I mean,
So call it 15 feet.
20
5
yards. Well, but 20 yards. I mean, I'd have to shoot through all the way from one side of my house to the other, through the wall and into the neighbor's house to get 20 yards.
Exactly. So what for your situation, you would probably want something that has slightly more spread than like a Federal flight control 8 pellet like they were shooting. Granted, it's phenomenal how tight of a pattern that shoots. Say if you're out in the boonies and you've got a large sprawling ranch home that's maybe got a 30 or 40 foot long hallway, yeah, maybe that's beneficial there. Because now you're into like the 10 yards and a little bit beyond range. Say you're dealing with coyotes, predators coming at your animals. Yeah, you're probably going to want something that shoots super tight and you can shoot a long way. So you can shoot 60 feet from, say, the house to somewhere out in your field. Beyond that, you're probably going to use a slug anyway, more than likely. But, they kind of went into pretty deep detail about how to choose the rounds you want, how to determine if the rounds are flying consistently out of your shotgun, which involve patterning over a few occasions with a few different boxes, ideally of different lot numbers.
This also makes a hell of a good argument for, I mean, you can make this argument with any firearm, but it sounds like it's critical with a shotgun that you standardize on one defensive load.
Well, that you standardize on, I would say, defensive loads for a job. So
bear in mind that the average person
has one job. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. You know,
I guess what I'm saying is like pick a load, know how that load performs, know it
yeah,
inside out, know it at
absolutely.
different ranges.
Yeah, knowing at
Bear,
different ranges, and I would say throw 2 slugs on your carrier. Know how they are going to perform at whatever ranges too.
know what point of aim
Because
they're going to shoot to, because it
exactly,
probably
exactly.
ain't the same as buckshot.
They're actually pretty close. From what people were saying, it seems to me I didn't put a red dot on my shotgun for this class. I didn't want to spend the money if I didn't know if I was going to be happy with using a shotgun for my primary defensive weapon. I know now I have no hesitation with picking up a shotgun. If I have to go out and really far outreach somebody, I got plenty of rifles that'll handle that. I got rifles that are accurate well beyond my ability to shoot. But that's not a defensive use of a firearm. It's not. That's an aggressive use of a firearm. Let's be honest here. But so, for instance, I live out in the country. I know I've mentioned that to you guys before. I live kind of in the boonies. We have coyotes around here. We have a groundhog that is digging up my neighbor's shed and causing her all sorts of hell. I can't send a federal flight control 8 pellet load across my property line in my neighbor's yard to take out that groundhog for her. But what I could probably do is pick up, say, a flight control goose load, because that's going to hold a tight pattern out to quite considerably farther. Coyotes coming on my property, we've had them a couple of times. We've had sick deer coming onto my property a few times. Now, up by where Andrew's at, Trek was saying that he's had bears coming onto his property. He's got a little plot up there, and if he's, say, outside taking a night vision walk, as people tend to do when they own night vision, and he comes up on a bear, is his 20 gauge with birdshot for taking out varmints he may encounter going to work? No. He's going to need a slug or some buckshot. Is buckshot probably going to do that great with a bear? Maybe. But everybody I've ever heard has always recommended slugs for bear, as big of an expanding slug as you can get. So it all depends on your environment. Like your environment, you're what, semi-urban?
I mean, yeah, I live in the suburbs.
Okay, so suburban, short ranges, find a shotgun load that spreads reasonably for your engagement distances in the house. Because if it's not spread out enough by the time it hits the various walls of your house, it's going to overpenetrate. Because let's talk about that federal flight control. If you were to shoot it into a piece of drywall, I would say before 15 yards, it is probably going to rat hole through multiple sheets of drywall, multiple walls. And I'm sure there are videos online that have done pretty exasperated testing of that. I know there was a guy on YouTube, I wish I could remember his name, real big shotgun guy, was really pushing number 4 buck for home defense loads in urban environments, because it goes through about half as much drywall and it's still reasonably effective on a human target in home defense style ranges. But because of the lighter weight of the pellets and the slightly wider spread, it doesn't tend to punch through quite so much barrier. You know, it's going to be one of those things where it's, unfortunately, no one is going to be able to give you a good answer on what ammo to use in your shotgun, because 2 shotguns of the same manufacturer are going to shoot your load differently. And we did see that in class. There was 2 guys right next to each other with 1301 shooting federal flight control 8 pellet. And their groups, one guy's groups were a half inch bigger than the other on the 5-yard line. Can't explain it. That's probably some of the most quality controlled ammunition you can get. It's their premier load.
I mean, you know how this works with long range precision shooting, though, is that two rifle barrels coming off the line, one right behind the other. One could be a dog and one could be, the best shooting barrel in the whole bunch.
And honestly, you could probably make that dog into a really nice shooting barrel with the right velocity.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's all witchcraft at the end of the day.
Well, it's all steel harmonics and a little bit of internalized stresses in the manufacturing process.
Like I said, witchcraft.
Yeah, but you can predict the witchcraft a little bit. Come on now, you're not giving these steel guys too much credit here.
Uh,
So
I'm I'm not a steel guy. I'm a reloader. I just keep playing with it until I find what works. I don't
but
understand why it works. I do understand why it works.
I'm a steel guy. I cut steel all day, every day, and tell you, sometimes we send steel out to heat treat, and for whatever reason, it comes back slightly different shape than it was supposed to. It just happens, and it's mostly down to stress in the metal, and how much of that stress you've removed from where on the part.
Hmm.
Now, hammer forged barrels, hammer forging is going to cause a lot of stress. That stress is useful because it shapes the barrel the way we want. But if it's not done consistently or at exactly the right temperature, you're going to get slight differences. And shotgun barrels, being very, very thin, considerably thinner than rifle barrels, produce a more pronounced difference due to those stresses.
That actually makes a ton of sense when you think
Right.
about it.
And it's because of those thin barrels moving as much as they do during firing that you often see anything mounted, like those barrel clamps you see where it's pinching the barrel in the mag tube, and then you've got a Picatinny rail on the side with
Like,
your flashlight.
yeah,
So that barrel, if you ever watch a shotgun barrel when it fires, it actually swells and then decreases, and swells and decreases with the pressure change, as well as doing the barrel width that you see on long range guns. That apparently will just chuck flashlights and anything clamped to the barrel.
I'm not shocked by that, honestly.
Right. I mean, it's a violent recoil. I mean, you're in order to get to a similar muzzle energy. What was I looking at? Let's see. Yeah, in order to get to a similar muzzle energy, you have to be talking something like a 30-06 or a 300 Win Mag
So
to be
not
even
quite,
close.
not quite dangerous game rifles, but
Right.
big boy
I mean,
stuff.
sure, you can get into dangerous game rifles that have twice as much muzzle energy as a shotgun, but you're also getting 3 rounds in a magazine, and it's a bolt action rifle because semi-autos will explode unless they're quite heavy. I mean, look at how heavy a 50 BMG is. I mean, there are some dangerous game rifles that do approach that level of muzzle energy. I mean, think of the old. Have you ever heard of a stopping rifle?
Hmm.
It's
So,
essentially
so
it's
named
essentially
because,
a rifled shotgun.
yeah, but stopping rifle is the thing you pull out when something desperately wants to murder you and your entire family, and you want it to stop right now.
their, their
Not
rounds are
after it's,
regularly measured in ounces,
yes,
not ounce, ounces.
ounces.
I had the displeasure of firing a 4-bore stopping rifle recently that a retired coworker of mine has acquired, and it is the most uncomfortable firearm I have ever held, let alone shot. It weighs more than I think double anything I own,
And
and
still
it's
kicked like a mule.
oh my gosh, yes, oh my gosh, miserable. It's so, for instance, 4-bore. What that means is 4 lead balls of that diameter would add up to 1 pound. So it is a quarter pound of lead that you are sending at like 1,500 feet per second or so.
And unfortunately, anybody with a cursory understanding of physics understands that the amount of force you send that direction pushes back that direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the weight of the rifle helped, I'm sure. Didn't feel like it. But
No, this is like the conversation you and I were having right before we keyed up because my family stopped by the USS Alabama years ago, and
nice.
yeah, the second largest deck guns ever employed on a U.S. battleship. I think the Iowa class was the same diameter, but I think a greater powder charge. But
I believe that's correct, yeah.
yeah, but I because I'm a nerd, everybody knows me knows I'm a massive nerd. I did muzzle energy calculations on it because I just got curious, and the first problem I had was I had to convert an absolutely ludicrous number of pounds into grain so that the muzzle energy calculator would work. And I worked backwards to something like that deck gun has 18,500 times the muzzle energy of a 30-06.
Yep.
The numbers when you need a scientific calculator to do those calculations, that's when it got silly in a hurry.
You require scientific notation to keep the
Yes.
decimals on to keep the numbers on the calculator screen. Yeah, yeah, it gets
But
wild.
that's also why a battleship that weighs as much as 10 city blocks moves 10 feet when it fires.
Exactly, exactly. Everything has a consequence. You know, it's fortunately shotguns are not that violent. And
Thankfully.
if you have a little bit of training in how to mitigate the recoil, I would say it was no more uncomfortable to shoot than a semi-auto 308. So if you can handle a semi-auto 308 or even a 308 on a bench rest, you're probably going to be just fine.
So coming out of that class, I guess my question is like, I know you said the shotgun did great. You had some difficulty with some of the reloading under
Oh, I
pressure and
absolutely did.
things like that. But coming out of this class, like, what's your path forward? Just more practice or more classes
Definitely
or
drills. Definitely reloading drills. Because the thing I seemed to fumble with most was ironically loading the tube from the side saddle. Just
you say
not
ironically that makes complete sense to me because I mean, like I told you, what was told to me by an old hand revolver guy a long time ago was if you're going to shoot a revolver, if you're going to carry one, you spend half as much time reloading the silly thing as you spend shooting at the range.
you do.
So you better like for my little J frame, I literally run drills every now and then where I put 5 empties in the gun and I put it
Mm-hmm.
like fired cases that have been resized so they're expanded, they
Okay.
drag on the way out, like
Yeah. Fantastic
because
training.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, I do that specifically because with that little short ejector you get in a J frame, if you don't whack that ejector star nice and hard, you're going to end up
Mm-hmm.
with all 5 of those shells hung up in the cylinder.
And then
So
you're
you
in
got to
trouble.
hit it. You got to hit it hard, and then I'm reloading from a speed strip,
Mm-hmm.
and that is not an intuitive method of reloading
No,
4 or 5
100%.
rounds. So you're fumbling with the silly thing every which way. But I'm like, but that's what you have to do to reload that gun.
Yeah.
And when you only have 5 rounds in the cylinder, you're going to be reloading it not very often, hopefully, but you're going to be reloading it
Ideally,
if you
yeah.
have to.
Right. The reason I say ironically was because I thought what I would have trouble with was under pressure emergency reloads to the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's something I had never practiced. Not once. Because there's never an emergency reload during a pheasant hunt. There's
No.
not. Okay. Pheasant got away, there's 4 other guys in the line, one of them's gonna get it. But under pressure, trying to ensure that number one, you got the shell lined up the correct direction. Number two, you're applying enough pressure in the correct location on the lifter to get it to fold in. And number three, making sure you're pushing it far enough that those little claws inside of there grab the rim of the shotgun and it just doesn't shoot right back out.
So how many times did that happen?
On me, I ended up inadvertently ghost loading my shotgun by having it eject fantastically back on top of the lifter, but then there was a round where the lifter needed to be, so I couldn't load a second round into the shotgun, probably 3 or 4 times. So it's one of those things where you definitely have to train in that muscle memory on those reloads, and that's probably what's going to be one of my biggest focuses coming away from that. Definitely training on reloads. I think I am going to go ahead and put a red dot on my shotgun because everybody I've ever seen shoots better with a red dot than without one. It's just a faster sighting system than rifle sights. I can't see any argument other than reliability for not doing it. And even then, if you do happen to shoot the glass out of your red dot, it is still a shotgun. You aim down the barrel just like a traditional rib and bead sight, and you still have a usable shotgun. It's not like, say, an AR where if you don't have backup irons and you shoot the glass out of that, now you've got kind of a close range used weapon. Well, the shotgun, it's kind of about the same as it was before. Even with the rifle sights, they're fairly crude.
Basically, you have a big ghost ring.
Exactly.
If
It would turn
you
into
knock the glass out of it.
right. You have a big ghost ring, and you And if you've done any shotgun shooting from a bead in a rail, you'll probably be just fine. They do have a qualifier they shoot at the end, which is pretty fun. I think it is, let's see. It's 4 rounds over 2 targets. I think it was the first one. Then it was 3 rounds, but you've got to do an ammunition selection. So your first round is going to get ejected out of the shotgun, and you've got to feed another round in, and then engage your target, and then engage your target 2 more times. And then it was some kind of emergency reload drill one for the qualifier. It ends up being like 15 rounds for the qualifier 15 rounds that you start with. You only actually fire 10 of those rounds because some of them are pulled out in the ammo selection parts or the emergency reload parts. But it's not bad. It's a 6-second drill for each one of them. And I think that, if I remember correctly, the instructors demonstrated the drill on a 4-second timer instead of the student's 6-second timer, or 5-second timer. They were on a 5-second timer. And they were done well within 4 seconds. I think that pump shotgun, semi-auto, you guys, it's achievable. It's very achievable. I went in there with nearly no experience with my shotgun, and I was able to very easily beat the 6-second part time. You're not shooting huge distances. I think most of the time you're working at 12 or 15 yards. So it is a relatively small target, but it's very doable, I would say, for the average person.
And I think
hands down,
what's noteworthy is that, like, you came into the class. What was the phrase you used? Perfectly mediocre.
Yeah, adequately mediocre or adequately mediocre. I could take the shotgun. I could hit a couple clays, hit a couple targets. I couldn't manipulate it with proficiency, and I feel like after the class, I have a foundation built that I can turn into proficiency.
So you came out of the class definitely with a greater level of comfort. I mean,
yes.
Like you said, you came out of this. You went into this class with limited shotgun experience. Came out saying, "I am more than content to grab this for defensive use."
I would have no hesitation picking up that shotgun if I had to use it under pressure. Would I prefer a 30-round AR? Yeah, I would. I very much would. But I unfortunately don't get to make that choice. So we work with the tools we have.
If you ever decide to move down to the Gulf Coast, I hope you house hunt.
Yeah, I know, but it's so hot down there. It's so hot.
I would say you get used to it after a while, but I would be completely and totally blowing sunshine up your behind.
I know plenty of people that have made the move up here because of the heat.
I've lived in this climate for 41 years, and it still sucks.
Yeah. A lot of people, I've gone to a lot of different training classes. I've trained with, there's my dog. I've trained with 5 or 6 different training academies in the last few years. And hands down, MDFI's, as far as their basic class, I haven't taken any of the advanced ones yet, are hands down the best quality class I've ever taken. No, not even close. I've done 2-gun pistol rifle classes. I've done pistol classes. I've done rifle classes. I've done long range classes. This was the safest and most well-run class I've ever taken.
I mean, honestly, it's kind of just what I expect, having talked to Trek a good handful of times.
Yeah, he is a no bullshit guy, and he is going to give you the truth as he sees it. Now, he will also correct himself if he finds something is incorrect. I mean, he's one of those guys that he wants to try to give you the best knowledge and training he can in the safest method he can, which I really appreciate, because it's deadly equipment we're playing with out there.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on this afternoon. I think it's been a good debrief on the class and your experience. And
so if anybody's thinking about it, just pull the trigger. Go to one of his classes.
Pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, let's go ahead and punt this one out the door. Matter of Fact's podcast. Nick, you don't do social media, and I don't blame you, because
not really.
It's a shithole most days.
The best thing it's there for is arguing with people.
We do plenty of that in the patrons group, which is, where you can find me, Nick, Andrew, and most of the other rabble rousers most times. So if anybody's curious, wants to get to know him, I would say start there.
Yep. Best place to find me, Patreon.
All right. Matter of fact, going out the door. Good night, everybody. Take care and go get a class. Bye, everybody.
Bye.